that. So this is the Oz report for Saturday, May 28th, 2022. And let's start with Plex, okay? Plex has been rallying ever since CCP announced the sub price increase. That is logical because you will have more people wanting to sub with Plex as it costs more money, and plus the price of an Omega subscription and Plex is obviously very much tied. So the rise in Plex has been unsurprising. We've seen about 20 to 30% rise, probably a little bit extreme. So right now at 3.7 million, it's a very high price. I don't think this is going to go much higher, but who knows in this crazy environment. More interestingly are the large skill injectors, because the large skill injectors, they had been rising with Plex in April, but then in May they kind of stagnated, right? And so right now, if you look at the skill farming profitability, which is the relationship between Plex and large skill injectors essentially, you see that there's a huge loss on every account that is skill farming right now, so that is turning Plex into large skill injectors, okay? Typically, in a normal environment, that would mean that large skill injectors are just lagging, so they will be increasing in price. And we just, in the last day or two, we have seen that happen. Now, CCP introduced kind of a new dynamic into that whole system, because now, 2 days ago, they started a sale on skill extractors. So now there's a 2-for-1 sale on skill extractors. And that is another component in that whole turning Plex into large skill injectors equation. And so theoretically, the skill extractor sale should put downward pressure on the large skill injectors. But since they were rising anyway, they're kind of just stagnant and still rising. So to me, anything under 700 is still a good price to buy large skill injectors, because if Plex prices stabilize at 3.7 million, then large skill injectors will have to increase, because right now there's no way for people to turn Plex into large skill injectors at a profit. And in the past, that has always meant that large skill injectors will increase in price. Now, there's also a sale right now going on daily alpha injectors. Those have a very specific application area, right? Only for alphas. So what you can do here is definitely buy into the dip here that is just being created by the sale, right? Right now, they had been trading more around 50 million. Now they're trading more around 40 million. There's a quick buck to be made there, because those are very much very specific in terms of source and very specific in terms of application. And so there, it's a good time to buy them right now. Okay. Let's talk about Siege Green, right? The big patch that hit 2 weeks ago that transformed production again quite significantly. Essentially, what we saw is we saw faction ships and capitals and battleships had their BPCs, their blueprints, blueprint items reduced quite significantly, and so. Specifically, a bunch of the components, auto integrity, preservation seal, and life support backup units, they had their output quantity increased to 3 from 1. So you would expect their price just to be cut by 2/3. And that is pretty much what happened. If you see that dip right here, life support backup unit, they've kind of stabilized around 80K, and auto integrity preservation, they've kind of stabilized around 50K. Now the only thing that's going to move them is a fluctuation in the raw materials that go into them. But at least now we should be very close to something that resembles a stable market and stable prices for most of these faction ships and also battleships. Capitals, they're still in flux just because, the production ramp up there takes a much longer time and much more effort. Core temperature regulators are trading a bit too cheaply, if you ask me right now. They didn't have they had a little bit of PI taken out of their blueprints, but nothing major. So the dip here right now that has them trading at 8.3 million, it is quite cheap. This is very close to build price. So core temperature regulator, if you ask me, they're a little bit too cheap right now. Now, let's talk about some of the other impacts of Siege Green. We're talking earlier on the stream already about gases. Gases, we have two major sections there. We have the fullerenes coming from wormholes, and we got the mycocerrosin and the cytocerrosin from null. Mycocerrosin are the ones that are trading in much higher volume in the forge. And so if we look at the fullerenes from wormhole gases, you can see that they exploded in price essentially because their supply was way too low in the market to sustain a restart of production that we saw. So in the end, we saw things like fullerite C28, C320, and C540. All of them spiked in price because there wasn't enough left in the market. Now, the question is, how is the market going to react, right? Are we going to see more of it hitting the market, or is the supply so low because nobody is mining it and taking it to the forge? Instead, they're mining it and maybe using it locally for production, or there's just not enough, mining going on because mining was reduced so much over the last month and years that the amount of mining going on just can't compete with the increased level of production that we're seeing now, though. So fullerites from wormhole, the mycocerrosin, we saw some of them correct a little bit, but in the end, all of them spiked in price and kind of stabilized at a higher level at 52-week high volumes, and that is not surprising because we're coming from a world where essentially there was no capital production and faction ship production going on, or very little. Only by people who really love it and don't care about profits, right? To a world where now actually production is starting again. And the interesting thing you can see on these gases is that the volume, right? Production started again. People bought a bunch of it. However, the volume doesn't increase. And what that tells you is that it's not actually more hitting the market and more exchanging hands. It's the same amount or fewer units hitting the market and demand increasing, right? So people are buying everything that is available, but people aren't supplying the market. And the reason for that is that before there wasn't enough demand locally for it, so people were taking it to JITA and selling it. Now that is not happening. People are keeping a lot of it locally, and the prices are spiking. So right now, a lot of the individual miners or alliances are going to have the decision between selling it maybe at a large profit in JITA or producing locally. So that's an interesting dynamic that's going on with gas right now, just because the supply is too low to sustain production, right? So, real quickly, minerals. We've seen minerals dipping in price all year because their availability was increased after the quote-unquote prosperity patch, and now increased production is what you would expect, is a slow increase. Nothing crazy, but a slow increase on pyrite and zydrine as well. Especially in the last week, we saw a pretty significant uptick. Nothing really major though. Just a question of how much is production going to kick off in the next few weeks. The basic minerals, besides isogen, aren't really the big bottleneck right now. So isogen is the big bottleneck, and it's trading 300, 400, something insane at 300% yearly average. But stuff like pyrite and zydrine is more slowly increasing because now there's actually an increased demand going on. Moon materials, where they had been crashing right? Because we saw the availability be increased so much end of last year, right? The connection, the connection of, or the both of those things happening at the same time, the increase in availability and a reduction in production, really made moon material prices crash over the last few months. As you can see, you know, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, they all look like that. They all crashed. In the last month or so, as people were starting to produce again, this started increasing. This week, though, we saw quite significant drop again in a lot of these, except for R4, because those go into these components up here, the auto integrity preservation seal and the life support backup units. But you know, chromium, cobalt, mercury, these all dropped quite significantly again, which kind of broke with the rally that they had been going on. And what that tells me is that as production increased, there was a short-term demand increase, and supply was actually short for a short period of time. However, the stockpiles that people have amassed of moon materials, of, you know, this there was so much moon material being mined and so little being used in production that the stockpiles are huge out there. And so, yes, there was a short-term increase in price, but in the end, now there's enough in the market that people are able to dump out there, and they are using those stockpiles to turn a quick profit, and that's what we're seeing now. So moon materials overall crashed 7% this week, and that is very, very significant, and that is very disappointing because I was hoping for a bigger rally from the production increases. We look at PI. Coolant actually came back, and that is in connection with fuel blocks. So some of the fuel blocks actually increased in prices again. Coolant increased in price. So if you're holding on to coolant or fuel blocks, keep an eye on those prices. It can be quite profitable to sell right now. Self-harmonizing power core. This is the P4 PI good that goes into the capital core temperature regulator blueprint. That is one of those new capital components, and this component was basically not used in the past few months because there was not a lot of capital production going on. Now that is starting again, and people are preparing for that, and that's why self-harmonizing power cores spiked in price. That initial rally, that craziness is over, so this actually dipped below 2 million again. So if you're still holding on to them, I would suggest you sell them, because the market is going to react. People are going to adjust their PI to produce these, because at prices around 2K, this is just way too profitable. So if you're still holding on to these, make sure you sell them. We've covered the injectors, Plex, and extractors. Let's talk salvage real quick. Power circuits, mentioned this earlier on stream. Power circuits are basically gone from the market. There's not a lot of them left. There's less than half a trade day left in the forge market, and they're on a hardcore rally going on right now. So power circuits, somebody could buy out this market very, very easily right now with very little effort. And I am half expecting somebody to do it, because if nobody's going to do it, I might. And so we'll see what's going on here. Prices of 400K I think are possible. Just make sure if you're buying out, or if you're buying from sell orders, make sure that you understand your taxes and fees, so you're not just breaking even or something. What's the reason for the power circuit increase is a question from chat. These are used in tier 2 rig production. So all I can guess is the overall increase in production for various ships, and the drop in price for various ships have also increased the demand for certain modules. So that would be my guess of why power circuits are increasing right now. We'll skip these just in the interest of time. structures. Athanors have recovered a little bit, but are still they're still trading fairly cheaply. 595 is still cheap for an Athanor. That is a reflective of the recent patch that makes them a lot less safe to deploy in space. Tataras, just want to mention those are very expensive structures. However, they are especially expensive right now because somebody bought out all of the available units. And so right now Tataras are at 9.5 billion price in the forge, even though their production price is something around 5 billion. So right now, if you have these, maybe a good time to offer them at 7 or 8 billion and still turn a very, very good profit. Even the buy orders are probably creeping up there. I don't suppose a lot of people have Tataras just lying around though. But maybe you're trying to get out and trying to cash out of something. Let me finish today with just talking about trig ships really quickly. Mentioned this last week as well. Dracovax and Vatmax, they are two very, very popular trig ships, and they were impacted by Siege Green massively, right? So their price halved. In the example of the Dracovac, the price just halved from 300 million to 150 million. And so this, you can see based on the trade volume, this is making those two ships very, very, very popular. And so people are producing them, people are buying them, and that is making 0-point condensate, the abyssal material, rise in price. And so right now, if you're looking at the number of people running abyssals, is fairly stagnant, even decreasing a little bit, and the demand for abyssal material increasing a lot. So that's why the price is rising here, and I don't see why in the short term this should be going down again. So I think this price is here to stay. It might even rise a little bit because now for the Vedmak and the Dracovac, now there's room again for those prices to go up, because we're at very, very cheap, even historically speaking, cheap prices for these very popular ships, right? Speaking of abyssal filaments, there are two filaments that are very short in supply but are very popular, and that's the chaotic electrical filament. Right now, if you can always get buy orders fulfilled in these because people are running abyssals and selling their loot. So chaotic electrical filaments and raging gamma filaments, two filament types that you should put buy orders out there to turn a profit. All right, that was a longish Oz report today. We're going to return to the regular stream. I'll see you guys next week, and you guys play safe. All right, bye.